So good evening, beautiful people, LBE community, fam, constituents, allies, accomplices, all of you, welcome. Um, this is a very special discussion, and all of our live streams are special. This one is very special. This evening we have a a phenomenal panel from all walks of the lived Black experience that is going to come to us to talk about COVID-19 and the Black community. Good evening, Sister Kara and my brother's son, Jermaine Barkley. How are you both?
Good evening. Doing well.
I am hanging in there.
Good,
Good
good.
evening. Thanks for having us.
So what say you both to COVID-19 and how it has affected our community?
You know, this is, we always start off saying how special each of these sessions are and how excited we are for them. And I think the one word that comes to mind when it comes to this one is that it's kind of a cliche to say it, but this one is personal. Right? It's very different for us to be focusing about or on this topic just because of how disparately our community is impacted by COVID-19 and the different things that stand in the way of access to vaccines and the impact of the virus itself and all of those things. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and in that same vein, COVID-19 has both brought to light and exacerbated so many of the inequities and systemic gaps that our community was already facing. And so it's forcing us to have really difficult conversations that were a long time coming, and try to solve really complex problems, because at the end of the day, when we're talking about the spread of disease and we're talking about why people choose to get vaccinated, whether they can get vaccinated, we're not just talking about those points when it comes to the Black community. We're talking about all of the systemic contributors around those points that leads to someone's access to services and whether or not someone gets infected with this disease. And so, in some ways, it's been a good opportunity for us to really finally have these conversations on a national level, because COVID-19, it's impacting everyone in that way. It doesn't quite discriminate, but we are still disproportionately affected in so many ways. And so it's forcing us to ask the question as to why. And hopefully we can get at the root of some of that tonight and maybe even talk about some solutions as to how to change that script.
Absolutely. This is, I like that, Sister Kara. This is very personal this evening, so much so last evening I was talking to one of my other sons, and he just buried his father 2 weeks to yesterday, behind COVID. And what really is so difficult about his story is that his father refused to get the vaccine because he was following all of the conspiracy theories, and so his father did not get the vaccine and ended up contracting the virus and succumbing to it. So I'm really looking forward to this evening's discussion and out of it, get some peace from it too, and healing in this conversation or through this conversation. So with that being said, I'm out on the other side, and I'm really looking forward to this. Take it away.
Yeah, and rather than hear the two of us take it away, we'll actually have the distinct opportunity to be joined by Dr. Edmond Baker Jr. And so while we work on bringing him on, Kara, if it's okay with you, I'd love to just give him a brief introduction. Beautiful, beautiful. Welcome, Doctor. Just so everyone knows who you are, Dr. Edmond Baker Jr. is the Medical Director for Equality Care Centers and holds a faculty position at Arizona State University. Go Sun Devils. He received his undergraduate degree from Temple University and his medical doctorate from the University of Michigan Medical School. His postgraduate training was obtained at the University of Michigan, the Phoenix Integrated OB/GYN Program, the Lahey Hospital and Medical Center, formerly the Lahey Clinic. Dr. Baker had a non-traditional journey to medicine. After serving in the United States Army, he began a career at DuPont Automotive Products, where he became their first African-American account manager. And then after 15 years, he left his corporate job and went to pursue his dream of medicine. Dr. Baker is experienced in working with underserved healthcare deserts of both rural and urban America. And his goal as a doctor is to create better policy, better access, and better quality of care so we can create better care for those in Arizona. He has been and continues to work with One Community Initiative Task Force to stop the spread of COVID-19 and is a community partner with the Arizona Community Engagement Alliance against COVID-19 disparities. Dr. Baker, we're honored to have you today. Thanks for joining us.
Wow. I'm looking around to see who else you're talking about, man. Thank you so much for that introduction. I won't waste any more time, and my presentation is prepared if you can get that up on the screen. Now, I'm going to talk relatively quickly because I want to get through as much, but you will see me skip slides because this presentation and what needs to be known by those of us that are still on the fence. Now, remember, right now, mostly I'm preaching to the choir. You go to church on Sundays and he's preaching out there to the pew. Most of us are the sanctified. A few of us sinners, right? So he's preaching to us, but also preaching to those out in the hallway, those that are on the fence, and those that didn't even make it to service and are streaming it. This is for people that are on the fence, or if they have family members that are on the fence. So I will go into this discussion. First, just talking about some of the concerns that I get. And I've been doing this now for over 18 months, dealing with just COVID. And then when COVID went into the vaccine, I started seeing these questions come up. Of course, I expected the true anti-vaxxers. These are the people that don't vaccinate no matter what. That's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But for some of those who, if you're in the audience, I just want you to think about things like smallpox and polio, which were really, the risk of that has been reduced tremendously because of vaccines. And then we talk a little bit about some of this historical distrust. You hear about the Henrietta Lacks that happened back in the 50s. You hear about Tuskegee experiment. And, quite frankly, most people don't even know what the Tuskegee experiment is. I will tell you it went over 40 years and it went with the knowledge of the government. So for me to sit here and tell you that there's never been a time that the government has disappointed us, I'll be lying. But the important thing is to understand how we go about science today and how it's different than when this ended in 1974. And then people tell me, oh, Doc, this technology happened too quickly. It's not necessarily true. And I have information here that can help you understand when it really happened and also what this FDA approval or EUA that is being touted is what it means. And then to talk about not wanting to change DNA, and this because most people don't even understand how this works or any other vaccine has ever worked. And then uncertainty of just what might happen if they get vaccinated, with the juxtaposition of not knowing what's going to happen if you get infected either. So I come from a sense of equity. Yes, I work for Equality Health, but I come from a sense of equity. I teach a course called Cultural Diversity, Health, and Illness. And what I make sure that my doctoral students understand the total difference between equality and equity. And to achieve equity or give people what they need to have to make their best decisions, education is at the top of the list. And this is what this talk is about. So real briefly, these numbers go back to March, but they're not much different than today. But these numbers show you how African Americans and others are affected by this virus differently than white America. Just looking at Arizona, if you see this, it says that 130 per 100,000 white Arizonans have been died because of COVID. And this was as of March of this year. If you look and see the difference between the other races, African American is 230 per 100,000, Latin Americans 412 per 100,000, and then the Native population 845. What this means is we are dying, African Americans, twice the rate of white America, Latin Americans 4 times the rate, and the Native Americans 8 times the rate from this disease. And then up through March of this year, those receiving a dose, we still lag behind. The only ones that were even closer, Native Americans, because of the push that happened on the reservations, is much higher than it's been in the inner city. But if you could see this, back in May of this year, white Arizonans have received, 38% of them have received the vaccine, whereas African Americans only 23%. That's a big lag. And when we're dying at twice the rate, we need to really sit down and address this. So as I address this, let's imagine this as being a dinner table, because, you know, as African Americans, we receive our information verbally. We receive our information at the dinner table, around the campfire, in church, from the pulpit to the pews. This is how we get our information. So let it be so. Let it be a dinner table that we're sitting around. And please, if there's questions, make sure we gather them and make sure we can address these right in the conversation. So level setting about this vaccine, I'm not going to be here to tell you whether to get it or not. What I'm going to do is tell you the importance of it and also give you some facts. And some of the facts people talk about is, first of all, they understand what a virus is. And I put this slide in just to put in perspective what a virus is. So if a human hair is 65 nanometers thin, and you can pull that out and look at it, and you say, wow, that's really thin. A virus is 100 nanometers, right? 65,000 times smaller. It is so small that it itself can infect bacteria and kill bacteria the same way it kills. And active viruses are not alive. They are folded proteins which learn how to unfold and given in the right environment. So this virus, the COVID-19 virus, the right environment for it is inside a human cell. And it can only get inside, I'll tell you how in a couple slides. So big question, what's in the vaccine? I hear this all the time. Doc, I'm not putting nothing in my body that I don't know what it is, as they're smoking on a vape pen or you know, eating McDonald's that they don't even know what's in their food. But I will go ahead and I will answer this question, what's in a vaccine? So what I do is I usually put this slide up and people's eyes get big because they see a bunch of words and a lot of things that they don't know what it is. And quite frankly, only because I'm in medicine, can read a lot of Latin, do I know what each of these things are. And I quickly can recognize this. But most of you are like, there's no way I'm putting this in my body. But before you say that, just understand that this here is not the vaccine. I put this slide here purposefully because this is a daily vitamin. Look at all the stuff in it. This is a daily vitamin. And I do that just to show you that when I really show you what's in this mRNA vaccine, there are a lot fewer ingredients. This is the Pfizer on the left. This is Moderna on the right. And really all this is a piece of mRNA. That's how we get the message into the cells, surrounded by fat. It is a fat globule. And it is able to do what we need to do because the geniuses that helped invent it, which happens to be one of them, a Black young lady who worked for those folks and helped come up with mRNA technology. Mike Tyson, he's one of the greatest boxers of all time, but he's also someone that said some very amazing things. And the most amazing thing he said was, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And the United States was so cocky before this happened. And we had the best hospitals, best doctors, the best pandemic preparedness. And quite frankly, we learned very quickly we didn't have much of any of that. SARS, this is the virus, no need to go much into it, but this current virus came out in November, December of 2019, but it's very similar to some of the other coronaviruses that cause other SARS infections. The first one in 2002, and then that followed by 2012. And the reason why I show this slide is because the vaccine technology, understanding how to combat these slew or these three coronaviruses happened almost 20 years ago with the first one, when they understood that the glycoprotein, which I'm going to show you on the next slide, is the target. This is why we had to do it. So let me just show you that really quickly. This is a cartoon of the virus. Now, a lot of people are thinking, why is he talking science? It's because all the memes, all of the Facebook posts are talking about why not to do something based on science, but most people don't understand the true science behind it. So I'm just giving you some tidbits to understand about this. This virus has glycoprotein spikes. It's these little orange things that look like golf tees. Well, these golf tees are the key to get inside the human cell. Without them, they cannot get into a human cell, right? So if we were able to identify this and be able to prepare our system, our immune system against that glycoprotein, we will have in a sense taught our system to go after this virus. So you say, why is that important, Doc? And it's because if your body does it, it doesn't choose what protein that it's going to use for an antibody. So it could be the membrane, it could be any of these other things listed other than the glycoprotein. The last thing I want to talk to you about this virus is that it's it's an RNA virus. Now, the difference between RNA and DNA is really important in this instant. So let me explain it to you. DNA, that's how our bodies remake our cells. This is how we duplicate ourselves. DNA, when it's being read and replicated, cannot make mistakes. Because if it makes mistakes, that's how deformities of humans happen. So it is a near perfect cycle that is really regulated by your body. So when it sees mistakes, it gets rid of it. RNA is different. RNA is the piece of information that we use to make things like insulin, like saliva, like any type of hormone in our body. This is how it happens with using RNA in our cells and replicating. The difference is DNA is quality over quantity. RNA is quantity over quality. So it doesn't matter how many mistakes you make making RNA type proteins, because eventually you make enough of it that it doesn't really matter. Well, in the case of a virus, it makes a big difference, because with these mistakes comes the evolution or the variants which have been plaguing us ever since. Just real quickly, this is what it looks like. It comes in a cell, it replicates and goes back out. Thousands, millions of copies. This RNA from inside of here makes millions of copies. And remember, it needs these glycoproteins to come into the cell. Without them, it would not be able to come in. It would not be able to replicate. Again, as the RNA makes these changes to it, some of the proteins on the outside membrane may change. And by doing it, it changes how it works a little bit. And there's the alpha variant, which we knew that came out of England. But most importantly is this Delta variant, because that's the one that's really bothering us now. And let me explain why. So the only way to compare this virus is to compare it to the flu. Now we're at this table, right? We're having our discussion. There's 9 people there. I walk up, I'm the 10th person. I walk up to this table. I have a flu, right? With the flu, I said at this table, I can infect one other person. That's how infectious the flu is. It's just about what's called an R0 of 1. Now, let's go back to the original COVID, right? COVID-19 back in January of 2020. I have it. I now come sit at the table. There's 9 of us there. One of me can infect 4 people at this table. So you can already see there's 4 times more transmissibility of this virus versus the flu. That's the problem, right? Because it's now exponential. Every one of me that infects 4 of the people at the table, you guys get up, you can infect 4. Each one can infect 4. This is exponential. Well, we knew we need to do something. We need to get a way to slow this down, mitigate the risk, right? And a vaccine would do that. But before we had vaccines, all we had was masks, washing hands, distancing. You know, these are the things that really helped us navigate until we did have a vaccine. Now Delta variant came up, and it came out of India. The difference is now I walk up to the table with 10 people. I have Delta variant. I sit down. I will infect 6.5 to 7 people at this table. That's the difference. So not necessarily, it's potentially more deadly, but it's more transmissible than even the original COVID. So now more and more people are getting it. If we don't mitigate the risk, and we can't do so by going to full stadiums watching the people play football, it's not going to happen. If we can mitigate these risks by uses of things like vaccine and the other things we talked about, we can reduce the amount of people, reduce the load so that less people get it, and hopefully get to a point where we can have some semblance to normalcy soon. All right, this is just a thing talking about immunity. If anyone has questions, we'll go through this. I put this slide in talking about cytokines. Again, this is a science talk right here, but this tells you how you really get sick from the actual virus. The virus actually infects us. Our body is what makes us sick with this disease. These cytokines are produced by us to give you fever, cough, and the soreness. And if it gets overwhelmed, it goes into the cytokine storm where we shut down your liver and your kidneys and your lungs. So this disease is really a disease against ourselves caused by the virus that caused COVID-19. There are a lot of different types of vaccines out there. I'm only going to really talk about, only going to talk about 2. That's the non-replicating viral vector, because that's Johnson & Johnson. And then the mRNA, which is Pfizer and Moderna. Really quickly about phase trials, because this, EUA is not the same as a FDA approval. In essence, it is. There's 4 phases to a phase trial phase. And in between each one, you have to satisfy a requirement. The first one is safety. Give it to 30 people, they don't die. We review the data, it shows that people don't die. Goes into phase 2. Now we do 300 people, look to see what kind of dose of medicine we can use and still make sure they don't die. Once we look at it, review it, and understand that, yes, people are safe, we got the right dose. Now we go into phase 3. Phase 3 then will take about 10 times more people, like 3,000. We will look at the dose. We can look at the efficacy, or how well it works, and the safety again. And once we have data, then we submit it to the FDA. The FDA looks at it, and they approve it. Now, this is a typical drug. This is not necessarily the COVID vaccine. That is shown on this slide, because the difference between FDA approval and EUA, emergency use authorization, is during the time of testing. Now I'm going to go back to the slide. That's phase 1, 2, and 3. During those phases, they were producing the vaccine. Now, many people joined the game and only 3 made it through the gate, right? So a lot of people produced and could not ever make it to market and had to throw away all they did. But the 3 that took the risk, produced the material, went through testing and was approved, then were ready to distribute right when that approval happened. If they had done it the traditional way, it would have been a lag of months until they were able to get this out. And we would not have gotten vaccine probably to sometime mid this year. So that is the reason why difference between EUA and FDA approval. Really quickly, again, the 2 different types of vaccines, the viral vector here, all it does, the information that's inside the vaccine gives us the spike protein or the glycoprotein, which our body makes antibodies against, or the mRNA. Remember I told you a little fat globule surrounding the mRNA goes in your arm and does the same thing.
Not all vaccines are designed to introduce antigens to the body. Some work by using cells in a patient's body to produce the antigens themselves. Examples include viral vector vaccines and mRNA vaccines. In both cases, the goal is to get a short fragment of genetic code taken from the target pathogen, in this case the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19, into the patient's cells. By hijacking the cellular mechanisms, these kinds of vaccines mimic the way viruses normally reproduce during natural infection. But rather than creating copies of the virus, the cells only produce large amounts of antigen that then usually trigger a strong immune response.
So that's just in really quickly going over all the things I talked about. That is just a description of what how these vaccines actually work. I just want to finish on 2 slides. This one here tells you what we know. We know that vaccines will slow COVID spread because those who are vaccinated produce less of the virus, therefore have less of the virus to give away and infect other people. It reduces the risk of those that are vaccinated to having serious illness from COVID-19, as well as it reduced the risk of death of those that are vaccinated from COVID-19. There's a lot of things we're still learning, and one of the things I want to finish with is there's a question by a lot of people, do they really work even after I just say that? Yes, it does. This is Oregon State Hospital. This is one of the most amazing hospitals on the West Coast. They did a quick study looking at the people that were in the hospital at a given time, and they saw there were 63 people hospitalized with COVID. And of those 63, 5 were fully vaccinated. So 92% of the people were not vaccinated. People in the ICU, there were 31. So those that were sick enough to go from the hospital bed to the ICU bed, there were 31. And of those 31, only there was 1 that was fully vaccinated. So 97% unvaccinated. And then on the ventilator, so the sickest of the sick, you're in the ICU, you now can't breathe enough that you need to be intubated, and they breathe for you. On a ventilator, 27 people, there were only 1 of those people were vaccinated. And again, that's 96% people unvaccinated. Vaccines work. We need to believe the technology. And I will stop at that point and definitely make myself available for any questions that you might have.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Dr. Baker. Really appreciate that. And I've got plenty of questions that I certainly want to ask. So as soon as we get to that Q&A portion, I'll be sure to throw those your way. Man, that video alone was so informative, but all of that information is just, you wish that you could put these things on billboards and commercials, but we'll get into all that and how to get this information to larger audiences in a bit. for now, we'll go ahead and call Sister Kara back up to bring our panel back up for part 2 of this discussion. Kara, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Baker. That was a phenomenal presentation. So we look forward to diving into questions and answers with you in a bit. For now, I am excited to be welcoming our community member group discussion about COVID-19 to hear their reflections, their thoughts, and so forth on this virus in our community. Tonight, we have joining us Crystal Warden-Gant, Sandra Hickman-McCoy, and Deb Harris. Miss Crystal Warden-Gant was born and raised in Flagstaff, Arizona. She has worked for the City of Flagstaff Parks and Recreation Department for 24 years. She is married to her loving husband, and they are raising a beautiful 9-year-old daughter. Miss Sandra Hickman-McCoy was also born and raised in Flagstaff, Arizona. She is a family support specialist for NACOG Head Start, Early Head Start, and she works in the education environment with enrollment and high-risk families. And finally, Ms. Deb Harris moved to Flagstaff almost 30 years ago to take a position at NAU. Planning on only staying for a few years, she fell in love with Flagstaff and has made this her home. She retired from NAU in 2017. Since her retirement, she has continued to work in the community with a special dedication to the Southside community, where she serves as the executive director for the Southside Community Association, which operates the historic Murdoch Community Center. Welcome to each of you. So to get into your conversation, I'd like to invite you to just let's pretend like we're sitting around a kitchen table and just have a conversation. You know, what has your experience been with COVID-19? What are the thoughts that are running through your minds after the presentation we just saw, and as you're thinking about how you've seen COVID-19 impact your community here?
So I will go ahead and get started. I asked my sisters to come on and do this with me because I thought that our community, they respect them, they know them, they value their opinions, they've worked with their kids. And so I really wanted our community to hear from us. And so I'll go ahead and start. You know, when COVID first started, you know, it scared me, really. And I went into like a shutdown. You know, I wore the gloves and wore the mask, and I was very careful about when I went out to the grocery stores, and I washed my hands when I came back and took off my shoes, didn't bring them in the house, all of those kinds of things. And as soon as the vaccine became available, I did not hesitate, not one time. I'm going to tell a really quick story about why I believe so strongly in the science. My brother was diagnosed with multiple myeloma 12 years ago. That is a fatal diagnosis. People die quickly from that. When all of our siblings were tested, none of us were a match. So they did some other kinds of things to treat him for that year. Within 9 months, they had developed a test that was able to determine that I was his match. And so I was able to go in to the hospital and do a bone marrow transplant. That was 12 years ago, and he is still alive and doing just great. So the science was what got him to that point. And his doctor said, we just needed to buy you a little time. And so I believe strongly in the science because I'm a living witness that it works. And yes, it was pretty quick. So from 9 months where there were no matches of any of his siblings to the 9 months with less than a year, they were able to develop a test that could determine that I was the match. And so, you know, when I talk to people about the COVID vaccine, you know, I'm still well, I'm healthy, I haven't grown any, you know, additional parts or anything. And I feel really, really good about what I've done. And I'm not here to try and tell anyone what they should do. I'm just here to share my experience and to say that I worry about our community. I am really concerned about the Black community. And so when you said this is personal, it is personal, because I have watched members of a Black community, whether I know them personally or not, I still feel strongly connected to them. And so I want to do everything within my power to give people all the information that they may need to make a decision. I made the decision years ago to vaccinate my son against polio and measles and rubella and all of those kinds of things. And I didn't know what was in those vaccines, but I trusted them because I trusted the science, because I had seen it work, through the community. And so I just encourage people to think about that. And so I'll just kind of stop right there and let the others talk.
Thank you, Ms. Deb. And I want to acknowledge that I definitely borrowed that term of this being personal from you. I know we had a conversation about that not too long ago, but thank you for sharing your personal story and just why this matters to you so much. Ms. Crystal, I'll come to you and just have you share, what are your thoughts?
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate Ms. Deb asking me to be on this forum, just to share my heart. I am not a doctor. I am not a collegiate woman with a master's, but I have a heart for my community. And so I know that the things that I have to share are important. A couple of the things that Deb kind of spoke on, I thought about, in our community, sometimes there is a very legitimate fear and a justified skepticism about just what's happening in the world. And so our people get nervous, we're scared, and it's like, are we going to let them inject us with something right now? So those are very real things. And I was the same person. My husband, when the pandemic first began, he said, we're not going to get a shot until our baby can get a shot. We have a 9-year-old daughter, and his thought was, I don't want to take a shot. I don't want to be vaccinated, and you be vaccinated, and our own child is not vaccinated. And so that was a very real fear and a selfless thought of him thinking, we don't want to be safe without our child being safe, right? So I talked to so many people in the community, my people, my Black people, my white people, my Native friends, so many people who shared their thoughts and their information with me, nurses, doctors, everyone. And so I had to really make an educated decision. And it was still, I made the decision. So I've only had my first shot, but I did that because of people that I trusted, doctors that I trusted, nurses that I trusted, friends. And so it can be a scary thing to make that step. It's a big deal. I was trying to look at some other notes that I had. Forgive me. We were talking about some of the rumors and the fears and the truths. If you are hearing all of these things and you don't have someone that you can actually go to and get real answers from, how am I supposed to? I'm just a regular old chick in Flagstaff. How am I supposed to be able to make the right decision when I don't have the right information? And so, not to put all of that pressure on, the doctors, but we have to have people who can give us information that we can trust. And I hope it's a little helpful. that's part of my that was my experience with COVID.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that with us. Miss Sandra, I will come to you now as a lifelong Flagstaff person, as one of the, just a key person in our community. I'd love to hear your experience, your thoughts on the doctor's presentation, and just any thoughts that you have to share with us too.
Well, I'm like Crystal. Thank you, Deb, for asking me to be a part of this, because it is so very important for our community. For me, as soon as it came out, immediately when I didn't have any doubt about being vaccinated. Vaccination is what I've been accustomed to my whole life. You know, we've all been vaccinated for all the childhood diseases and so on and so forth. So I didn't have a great fear for it. My thought was my family, you know, my children. I have one granddaughter. And then I work in a community where I'm around a lot of people, you know, not only families and children, but also coworkers and their families. So for me, it was the full broad spectrum of the COVID and the effects it could just have on a community. So I didn't hesitate to be vaccinated. It took my family a little bit longer down the road to be vaccinated, but we all saw the benefit to it from the perspective of our jobs. You know, we're in the community. Their jobs are in the community. So it was beneficial for them. But my main thought is fear. This community have been fearful of the unknown and not actually knowing. Because I do have family members that have felt the safety net of family members that are vaccinated, so they don't feel they need to be vaccinated. Medications, you know, they don't want to, the side effects that have on the other medications that they take, or the other illnesses or something they have. They don't want the effect of COVID having an effect on that. And the doctor was talking about barriers, you know, just the barriers of just not wanting to do it. You know, working for Head Start in a federal funded program, the mandate now is all employees have to be vaccinated. And so now that has created a stir, you know, who's vaccinated and who's not. But just overall, I don't see why, and it's my own personal thought, if it's to help someone else as well as protect yourself, why not? I would feel horrible if I affected a child, you know, and that's the reality for me, because I'm in that community where I'm working with children. And from my job, you know, we have had children affected because parents are unvaccinated. And so it's just the whole spectrum of just who wants to be sick, you know. I don't know why, you know. Family members who are seeing family members sick. That's my next goal, is to see, are those family members who've lost loved ones and been through this traumatic experience, are they vaccinated? You know, so I'm kind of curious about that. You know, I know a lot of Native community. When the doctor was talking about the Native American community, wow, that really affected me, because I know a lot of people in that community, and I've talked with a lot of people from that community, and just how traumatic and devastating it was on the reservation, with people just getting sick and dying, and then the kids being traumatized. And yet, when you go out in the public, you still see those people wearing masks. When you walk around now, you see the population of people who really have been affected the most are the people that are still wearing masks, you know. So overall, I just think that it was good information. I learned a lot through his presentation, a lot more than what I knew. But to me, a vaccination means protection and safety. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And thanks to all three of you for sharing. I'm curious for each of you, as we talk about just what you've seen in the communities, and Ms. Sandra, you were just sharing about, seeing the indigenous Native community, how they had the higher rates of vaccination, they had the major traumatic impacts to their community, and seeing them still wearing masks now as part of that kind of collective spirit of protecting each other. I'm wondering for the others, how have you seen this kind of borne out in your community, whether it's a particular neighborhood, if it's a church community, or with your work? Just what have the conversations been like, or what have been some of the struggles that you've seen?
For me on the job, a lot of people just see it as their own personal choice. They don't really see it as whether it affects anyone else or anything else. It's just their own personal choice that they make. And so they don't really care one way or the other who it affects or how it affects. It's just they feel it's their own personal choice to make that choice.
Ms. Crystal?
Thank you, Sandra, for sharing. So I work at the Hal Jensen Rec Center, and so we are inundated with, a ton of amazing teenagers. And part of our struggle has been just the fact that we have to stay on them every day, multiple times a day. These kids are playing basketball. They're lifting weights. They are doing it, they're doing a lot of work, and so having to just remind them. Now, these young people have to wear their masks all day at school. And then when they come to the rec center, they want to hang out and play, and they want to take that break, and we get it. And it's been tough to have to reiterate how important it is to have your mask on. And we do it every day, every few minutes. You go in the rec center, you go in the gym, the boys and girls are playing basketball, then you have to come right back 10 minutes later and say, hey, put your mask up. It's difficult, it's tough. And so this is just a struggle that we're gonna have to keep working on and chasing. It's gonna be difficult for all of us. And my hope and prayer is that people will be obedient and open their ears and listen and just be open to something that you may not have been in the past. And what that's going to take is people in position, people in places of power to share that information and say, well, this is why you have to do that. People that you trust saying, this is why we should do this. And so that's my hope.
Thank you.
Yeah. For me, and I think all of you know my son, Lawrence. Lawrence is definitely afraid of needles. He does not like needles at all. I mean, he runs from a needle. And so when COVID broke out, he was really, very careful and wore his mask and his gloves and all of that stuff, because he's in LA. And so they really got hit hard right away. And then when the shot came out, and I was telling him that I had taken the shot, and he hadn't seen me for a while. And so one night he called and he said, Mom, he says, you know how I feel about needles. He says, but it would break my heart if I got something and brought it home to you. and I want to see you. And so I'm going to go and do this, And so it really was impressive, for me, because I know his fear of needles. I absolutely understand that. And so he was concerned enough about me and the people that he might infect. He said, I don't want to be the cause of me transmitting anything to anybody that might cause them to lose their life. And so I think that for me, that's what I think about, is that I don't want to be responsible, because I might survive it, but maybe the person that I transmitted it to would not survive it. And so I would be devastated if I had COVID or the variant and was exposed someone else to it and they didn't survive it. What would that feel like? And so I think that people have to trust the science. It is what it is, and all of those things that happened years ago, the Tuskegee Institute with that study, and with the woman with cancer, her cells, all of those things are real, and some horrific things have happened to our community. We survived, slavery and lynchings and all of those kinds of things. And all of that stuff is so real to us. And we have such a distrust of community, people that have power over us. But at some point, I think that we have to stop and say, you know what, things maybe have changed a little bit. And so I'm going to trust the science. I'm going to maybe trust the doctor that I've had for 30 years, that has been by my side through all of my medical issues, and has been there to support me. So I'm going to trust him or her when they tell me that this is okay. And so that's, I just encourage people to think about that. Think about who you're going to infect. Like Sandra said, she's around all those little kids, and they're so innocent. They don't have a choice. People, we tell them where to go and what to do and how to do it. And so we have to protect them. And if getting vaccinated is going to protect them, then I think that's what we need to do. And the same with, Crystal, she's around all those kids at the rec center, and she would feel awful if something happened to them because of her, when her job is really to support and to care and to nurture. So I think people need to just not be selfish and think about this. So.
And Ms. Deb, I'm just going to take just a quick 30 seconds to say, also, our people, how we get down, and we are about the Lord. You trust God. You don't have to go get this shot. You just pray, wash your hands, use your bleach like most of us do. Long before the pandemic, our mamas have been making us wipe walls, wipe off countertops. Y'all know. And so for me also, I would be remiss if I did not say, we also have to know that as much as we trust God, we have to also know that God put doctors here. He put these people here in our lives to give us their help as well. So I won't go on too long, but I just had to say that.
And I think, all three of us are women of faith. And we have our individual churches that we go to, and we trust God, because there's a plan, and it's not for harm and it's for good. And so we trust him every day of our lives. And this is just another part of that trust, and that belief that he's going to be in the mix, and that he's provided, doctors with the knowledge and the experience and all of that stuff, because it could not happen without his input. So we trust that.
Miss Crystal, I just want to note that you just got a mic drop reference in the comments on Facebook. Somebody said that you just dropped the mic. in your comments. And I also want to go back to another comment. I know I'm kind of blurring the lines between the upcoming Q&A and our conversation now, but one thing that I noticed with all of you speaking just now was your focus on the stories of community. Ms. Crystal and Ms. Sandra talking about your engagement with young people and just the impact of, you know, your influence in their lives and concern for their safety. Ms. Deb sharing about Lawrence's story of wanting to overcoming his fear in that moment because he wanted to see his mom. And one of the other comments in the chat was just saying we live in a society that is very selfish. We no longer worry about our neighbors and others. And so what stands out to me is just the collective thinking versus individual freedoms that you all talked about. And I'm wondering how you're seeing that within your community, or how you're trying to encourage that sort of thinking. You've all kind of spoken to it already, but is there anything else you want to say about just the importance of thinking as a village, of just thinking that, you know, we have to be in this together and thinking about each other, not just ourselves?
Well, I would love to jump right in here, not to take over, but so I'm 44. I'm older, but I'm not an elder yet. I have not yet received that blessing of being an elder. But just the things of the importance of the day-to-day checking on your neighbor. If that just means waving at your neighbor in your apartment complex, in your trailer park, in your house, if you have a house in a neighborhood, those little things that we don't even check on each other anymore. Those are the biggest things. Showing that love, being able to tell someone, hey, I'm going to be out of town this weekend. Would you mind watering my plants or checking on my puppy? Or so for me, those things are so huge. And at 44 years old, I feel like we are starting to lose some of that. But I don't think that it has to be gone. I think that it's something that we can grasp and bring right back. Borrowing the cup of sugar from your neighbor. I think those are things that can be absolutely real still right now. We just have to be the people that do it. We just have to be the people that do it. You, me, our daughters, our sons, our friends, encourage them. If you do that for them, maybe they will be encouraged to do it for their neighbors. So that's my piece.
And I would have to agree with that, Crystal. I think people aren't as humble as they should be, considering that we are all experiencing this on some level or another. Everyone's looking out for themselves. Everyone's just thinking about but working with, being from a large family, working with a large community of diversity of people, you have to show a little kindness yourself. I think still being kind-hearted, not showing fear yourself, because I work with some families, and when they come in, it's kind of, you know, your immediate thought just from looking at them is like, oh gosh, you know, what am I going to do? You know, or am I going to act fearful? And you have to show people kindness, and just that, you know, it's not as bad as it could be, but to help this family that is homeless, to help this family that is having these struggles or having trauma and all of that thing, you have to show the kindness. And I think then once you give that little smile, you give that little, that it's okay to be fearful, I think people are a little bit more easy to go along with you. But it is loving your neighbor, you know, and being kind and being helpful. All those things are still things we need to be teaching our children, even though they're walking around with masks and, they're becoming fearful of everything. You still have to show them that there's love in the world and that there are good people and that you can be happy and you can, just be a better person, still showing that be a good person. Being a good person does always pay off in the end, regardless of what your circumstances are. Going through this as we all are, because it is everyone's fight and everyone's struggle, but you can still be kind.
We need to look back into our history and our culture. And, I'm older than Sandra and Crystal. And so I can remember when in the Black community growing up on the south side of Chicago, everybody helped everybody. We were all in it together. And I think that some of us have strayed away from that. And we need to really get back to that. And if nothing happens from COVID other than it brings us back together as a community, as a Black community, take us back to our roots, take us back to the things that we were taught as children growing up, the things that we want our kids to learn from us. I think that those are the important things. And, we're going to get through COVID, but I want us to get through COVID without the more loss than what we have already experienced. I want us to get through COVID and come out on the other side of this and to learn that as a community that we came together and we helped one another and we protected one another because we did what we needed to do to make sure that the people around us was safe. I want us to go back to those roots and to not be this selfish. I'm not saying anything negative about any other culture or any other population, but I know the Black lived experience. I know how I was raised. I know what my community is capable of doing. I know that we can come together and help and support one another. We take in other people's children when those parents are no longer there. We raise nieces and nephews and grandkids. That's what we do because that's the kind of people that we are. And this is just another one of those challenges that we have to come together as a community, and we have to come out better on the other side of this. And we have to help each other as much as we can through this pandemic, because there will be a brighter day, as they say. So, but I think going back to what we've learned as a community and as young people growing up and kids, and what we're teaching our kids, that we are responsible for one another, that we are this village for all of us. So excuse a little sermon there, but
beautiful, beautiful words, Miss Deb. Thank you so much. Well, thank you guys for being part of this panel. I'm going to actually ask that Brother Jermaine and Dr. Baker come back on, and we're going to launch into our group Q&A. If any of you have questions for Dr. Baker, I encourage you to ask them as well, because this is just an opportunity for us to engage with him as well. But to open up the Q&A portion, I actually want to go to a question that we just got from the audience. It's actually Dr. Linnea Evans posted in the chat and just said, thank you all for sharing your stories and time. I was wondering, for the panelists that have frequent interactions with children and adolescents, from your observation, how are they contending with the stress of the pandemic? And do you have any suggestions for all of us on what we should be doing to be responsive to their needs?
For me, working with children, early Head Start is infants. 6 weeks to 3 years old, and then preschool is 3 to 5. So I have that range from basically 0 to 5 of families that I experience with. A lot of trauma. You see a lot of behavior, children acting out from the simple fact of being away from their parent that they have now become accustomed to being home with, or just remembering, especially for our Native American children, a lot of them really have a lot of trauma because they saw their grandma and their auntie and their uncle and all of that stuff. So I think the biggest factor for that age children has just been trauma. Not understanding why they need to wear a mask, or not understanding, why they can't be in close proximity with their kids or play, together. We're constantly sanitizing everything and constantly, making a lot of changes, and only so many kids in this area. And, so it's made a lot of difference for them. And a lot of it, they just don't understand, why so much is going on, or their parents who aren't vaccinated, just telling them, telling them to be scared of everything. So you see a lot of young children afraid to try anything or do anything, just a lot of trauma and behavior, a lot of behavior from these children. So we're having to work on a lot of, we use the pyramid model for, going from these foundations of, starting the structure at home and starting the structure at school, but just trying to get kids in a structure and in a routine and, just overcoming their fears.
I would like to add to that. Children are sponges, and they are only reacting the way us adults have been reacting. We're the ones cutting the fool on the airplane. We're the ones going to the gas stations, yelling at folks and cutting people off. So they're just emulating what they see us do. And I remember when Miss Warden was talking about her husband and her not wanting to do the vaccine until the children can get theirs. I just want to remind everyone, when you're on a plane and they tell you the plane's about to go down, what do they tell you to do? Put the oxygen mask on yourself first, because you cannot help anyone if you can't help yourself. And drowning boats, the same thing. Put the life vest on yourself first, so that you can then help all the other people that are suffering and need help. We need to really fix the trauma, not just in our children, but in the adults that are parenting these children. And so I think this is we can do a whole weekend seminar just on behavioral health and the lack thereof in our Black community. But I think that's where we need to start.
And I think that my contact has been mainly with, I have some contact with small children, but most of my contact is probably with junior high, high school, and college age, students. And so I don't shy away from talking about the virus with that population and talking to them about how critical it is for all of us to be responsible. There was a incident that happened at NAU back last year when COVID, it was shut, the university was, shut down, and they were telling students, they went online and not to be in large crowds and all of that kind of stuff, and that there would be consequences to inappropriate behavior. And as a former, associate dean of students, I understood, that we had to put some things in place to protect them. And so a group of students decided that they were going to not listen to what was said and what people asked them not to do. And then they were suspended. When NAU found out, they suspended that group of students. They can go home and be with their parents for a semester or a year. And then I had a colleague that said, "Oh, don't you think that was so awful?" And I said, I spent 30 years working with students and disciplining students. And a lot of that was keeping them from hurting themselves. And so if I get to send you home for a year, but I get to help you save perhaps your life, then so be it. It was worth it. And so, I think that talking to them about consequences, talking to them about behavior, talking to them about what's important and why we need to do what we need to do, it just is what it is. And we have to model that behavior for them. And I need to wear my mask when I'm with them. I need to make sure that I'm washing my hands, so I walk the talk. So that's what we do.
Jermaine, I'm going to hand it over to you to ask some of your questions, and then I want to go back to a question that we just got in the Facebook comments as well.
Right. And it's actually in a similar vein. I love what Dr. Baker said. I think a lot of times kids are just kind of following suit with what the adults are doing. And with children in particular, they're not necessarily, not to give a lack of credit to teenagers because they keep up on the news and they're pretty with it nowadays. But a lot of kids are getting their information from their parents, right? Or maybe where they get their news depends on their parents, and their parents might be consuming a lot of misinformation, especially around the COVID-19 vaccines. And so I guess my first big question for you folks is, it's one thing to put this information out there, but where do you think the messaging is most effective from, right? Should it be coming from medical professionals? Should it be coming from family? Should it be coming from community leaders like pastors? Who in our community would be the most effective person to get those folks who are on the fence to the correct side of the fence in your mind?
So that's easy in my perspective. I teach about this all the time. It's about trust. So before COVID hit, I was going to church. Before COVID hit, I was in the community, going to the food banks, doing things. So it was not all of a sudden, here I come on my shiny horse saying, here, do this and get fixed. We need, when I say we, anyone who considers himself to be a voice needs to be active and visible at all times, especially when things aren't going so well, so that people know who you are. And so that when you speak, you're not this stranger coming in with a white coat. You're a guy that we heard before. We know, oh, that's Dr. Baker. I know him. He's been to the church. He does free blood pressure checks 4 times a year. So it's got to be about trust. We got to go back to building trustful relationships. But, again, this is hard to do when we have been traumatized for so long and don't even know where a good relationship is half the time, less more understanding where the trustful one is. So, but we need to start building that. And again, I hopefully I started in my practice, not just my medical practice, but in my community practice as well. And I just challenge everyone to build those relationships and stop standing on your own in a silo. Just be part of the solution and not the problem.
Thank you for that, Doctor. I appreciate that. Any other dissenting or agreeing thoughts on that, on where this push should really be coming from?
I agree completely with that, because if you don't build that trust in relationships, there isn't a relationship. So that's exactly where it starts, whether it be in your family, be in your community, whether it be the families you serve, wherever, you have to have that build of trust in a relationship. And you have to be out in your community so people see you and you're visible and they see that you're a person that they can trust. You can't just come out and say this or that. They have to see you in motion. You have to be that role model to get that trust. And that's where it all begins, is with building those relationships. I agree 100%.
I know when the COVID shot became available in Coconino County, and I knew that we had quite a few older citizens who I spend time with from, time to time, Mrs. Lockett working in her garden, and some of the other people that that I'm with. And so I knew that the way they were scheduling the shots was going to leave out that population of people. And so what I did was I got on the phone and I started calling people. And I said, okay, are you interested in getting a shot? COVID. Do you want to take the shot? Because if so, I can help you get an appointment. Because the county had given me a number and said, we know that our older senior citizens are not able to get online and do all of this stuff. And so because that group trusted me and valued me, because, this wasn't the first time that I have reached out, to them. And so they did. They said, yes, I'm interested. Yes, I'll call. And then I said, well, do you know anybody else, in your age group, the 75 and 80 and 85-year-old people that are not going to get on a computer and schedule an appointment? That's just not going to happen. And they said, oh, yeah, so-and-so and so-and-so. I say, okay, give them this number and give me their names, and I'm going to make sure that there's a spot for them. And so I think that trust in that community, and for us, like somebody was saying earlier, is looking out for people, because we know that, we all know how to get on the internet and get registered or sign up, but they don't do that, and so I think making sure that they had access to that information and making sure that if they wanted it, they got it. And there was one that had said, no, I'm not going to get the shot. But then after talking for a while, they said, yep, you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and do that because I think it's the right thing to do. And so they put their fear aside, because I think because of that trust, and respect. So I said, yeah, building those relationships carried a lot of weight, and just like, Dr. Baker said, he's been doing blood pressure checks and going to the food bank and feeding people and stuff. And so when he came around talking about the COVID, people knew and trusted him, and they said, oh yeah, he's just not coming just now. He's been here all along. So I think that those relationships are key.
And Deb, you raised a really interesting point about the method in which they wanted folks to sign up, having to go online, and even being young and with it on the internet, it wasn't necessarily easy, especially when that website first came up. I want to go to Crystal first, and then Crystal, I also want to ask you the question of what are your thoughts of the state of the vaccine rollout now? Do we feel like it's accessible? Are there still barriers to getting it besides misinformation? And we'll start over with you, Crystal.
So I think it is accessible. I think we live in a community that is, we're in Flagstaff. Our people are putting it out there. But does that mean that it's actually accessible? Right? Just because this service is out here, it doesn't mean that it's actually out there. Does that make sense? I think about the young people that I am around, the minority groups that I am around, maybe people who are undocumented that I serve, and they feel like, oh, heck no, I'm not going to North Country to go get this shot because, oh my goodness, is that going to highlight my family? Am I going to now be in trouble? So it's out there. We live in an amazing community, but there are definitely barriers that are stopping people from feeling safe. You know what I mean? I hope I helped answer that in a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what say the rest of the panel? You know, now that we're about 9-10 months out from the vaccine rolling out, you know, there was a big push, you know, or a lot of conversation at least about we need to tighten up some of these barriers so that underserved communities like our community and the Black population get the vaccine. Do you folks feel like those barriers have been addressed? And if not, what are still kind of the glaring gaps in your mind?
Well, I tell you, one of the big things back when we started to understand the vaccine was going to be rolled out, there was a task force put together for the entire state, and when you looked at that task force, there weren't many people that looked like us on it, but I was asked to be on it, and I was extremely vocal, extremely. I probably interrupted every other sentence they said. And one of the things I talked about initially was needing to get out in front of the information train. And I never forget it because I was shot down. They says, "Oh no, we're going to really blast this. Everyone's going to hear about it." I says, "That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the information train. That's not how most of us get our information. Again, dinner tables, pulpits. It has to be personal." So, and when I talked to them about it, it was really poo-poo. But the good thing was our community in Phoenix did embrace the idea. And I began to do these talks back early last year. And we really started to try to get ahead of misinformation. Again, it's not a foolproof plan because there's only one of me. But you know, I think what we need is more information because there is no physical barrier because now it's everywhere. At least in Phoenix, it's everywhere. Literally, even the undocumented population understands fully. They can come and tell them their name is Donald Duck and they're going to get the vaccine. So that was, you know, I made sure that we went as far to the other side of things to ensure that everyone would get that vaccine. But now the education, because I'm fighting against some 30-year-old man in his mom's basement making memes and has no idea what he's talking about. And I have to fight that every single day, and it becomes frustrating.
I'm going to bounce back to some questions from the Facebook audience. One of them came from Pastor Corey Moore, and he was asking, it seems that people are beginning to take off their masks and relaxing their distancing. How do you have conversations with our loved ones about not following in those footsteps?
That's the hard part because I think they are more, people want to just follow the crowd, kind of. You know what I mean? They're just feeling those people that aren't wearing their mask. In my opinion, it's the opposite, but they feel as though, you know, those are the people that are vaccinated, you know, because they're lax about not wearing their masks, you know. But to me, it's the total opposite. It's the people that aren't vaccinated. There are ones that are walking around without their mask. I wear my mask. It's a requirement at work, but just even though I'm vaccinated, I want to protect myself at all costs and my community and the people I'm around and the family. I think it just seems like it's just the thing to do, you know, and they're feeling more comfortable because they think all these people are vaccinated. I don't get that.
You know, my son was just here back in August. I think he's from August to, you know, early part of September for about 10, 12 days. And you know what? And I still have not hugged him. I still have not hugged him. Even when he came home, we're both vaccinated. And I feel that. And he said, Mom, he says, I know. He says, I want to hug you so bad. He says, but I'm still hesitant, you know? I don't, we were out today, and, he talks to me like that. We went to the store, even though we both had our masks, we washed our hands when we came back, but, it's still like, it's hard. It's still hard, but we're so committed to making sure that we're doing all that we possibly can do to make sure that we keep each other safe when he comes home, with to see me. And he's only been here like twice now since COVID. And hopefully he'll be able to come back in Thanksgiving. But when he comes, we split a little car, like one of those little, what is it called? The little roomettes on the train, because he'll take the train from LA. And so we split the cost of that. I said, I want you to be safe. I don't want you out in the populace. So he goes in and he wipes down, the car before he, the room when he goes in. But, I think that we just have to have those conversations with our families and our loved ones. And we can't be shy about it, but I think we can have those loving conversations. Because we're not, like in the house with each other every day. So our situation might be a little different from other people's situation that live with their loved ones or their spouses. It's just, him in LA and then me here. But so I don't know. I just think that we just have to be courageous. Those are courageous conversations. And if our loved ones aren't doing what they're supposed to do, then maybe we need to just tell them that.
Well, my family members that aren't vaccinated, I wear my mask. So if it makes them feel uncomfortable, they can just feel uncomfortable, because I talk to them over and over again about the importance of how it is to be vaccinated. So if they don't feel uncomfortable that I'm talking with them in the same room with my mask on, so be it.
There's another question from the audience for this one is for you, Dr. Baker, and it's from Dr. Ann Carver. She asks, given the disparate mortality rate of Blacks in Arizona, what does an equitable response look like in terms of information and prevention?
Wow, that's the $1 million question. I have always said education in this instance. First, it was access. We had to make sure everyone was able to touch it and get to it. Cost could not be the other access issue, so we removed that from the equation. Transportation was one, so we made things equitable by giving transportation to those who needed it, both to and from vaccination events. So education to me is the remaining stalwart of this whole thing. It's the one thing that most people have sort of forgot about and have gone to different sources which are not necessarily trustworthy but are very believable by their presentation. So we just got to keep educating.
Jermaine, I'll turn it back to you if you have any other questions that you wanted to ask.
Yeah, that'd be great. That would be great. So, one of the interesting conversations that has come up recently, and this might be hopefully not too politically charged here, but it does seem like the conversation around vaccinations has become less of a medical and scientific issue and more of a political conversation, with governors kind of making decisions based off of party lines on whether or not they'll mandate masks, whether or not they'll mandate vaccines. There's a pretty consistent, it seems, divide depending on how you identify. My question is for the entire panel. How do you think that we got to this point where vaccinations have become such a polarizing political issue as opposed to a conversation around public health and science? What's contributed to that in your mind? And what do we do about that?
I think we have mandated everything from taxes to medicines but the one thing we have not mandated was common sense. So without that common sense, I mean, none of this is really going to work well. So I think that we need to go back to our core again, go back to family, go back to understanding how to love one another once again, and just plain common sense. You know, if you think about it, how we understood how to fight viruses happened back in 1700. You know, we didn't even know what viruses were back then, but we did know that smallpox was killing a large portion of the world. And what they noticed was that some people had these mild infections, and they think they understood it. So what they did is they went to people who were dead or dying from the virus, and all this pus that was coming off of them from these smallpox, they would make incisions on healthy people and smear this pus on them so that they would get a hopefully what they thought a milder infection. They killed some people, but the goal was to try to get them a milder infection, and it absolutely worked, right? And this is the beginning of what we understood to be inoculation or vaccination, which really, really didn't come true until the 40s, right? Until we really understood those pathogens and how they replicate it and how we can fight it. So I think we've come a long way, and going from a place where people would allow somebody to make incisions on their arms and spread pus from a dead person to now not being able to trust somebody who's putting in the work in the lab and understanding science is just, it's just so mind-boggling to me how we ended up where we are.
Thank you, Doctor. And same question for the I see a lot of quite the anecdote. I see a lot of head shakes. You know, the same question goes for the rest of you. You know, I'm young still, but I don't remember necessarily such a virulent time to where vaccinations were such a political topic. How do you feel we got here?
You know, I did not know that about smallpox, Dr. Baker. I was like, I don't think I would have been letting people put stuff on me there. Maybe, maybe not, but I don't think so. I think that how we got to this, how we got to this point is that it definitely is, you know, about political parties and about people wanting control over other people. And you know, and spreading fear, you know, to people. You know, I think that, and that's a part of wanting to control, wanting to be in control. And it boggles my mind when I hear that people are dying and on their deathbed, they're denying that it's COVID. And I'm like, what else in the, you know, what is it, you know, because you were fine 10 days ago and now you're not. And so, you know, I just think that for me, you know, I'm just going to keep telling people what I believe and what I know to be true. And if you're not vaccinated, then I'm going to be really, really careful around you. I'm going to wear my mask around you. I'm probably not going to spend a whole lot of time around you. And if I hurt your feelings by that, I'm really sorry. But maybe when we're through this pandemic, you know, we might be able to come back, you know, together. But for right now, I'm going to be cautious, you know, so.
And for me, I see this a lot because we have so many parents that children are exempt from vaccinations. And so I think it's just like the doctor said, I think it's just ignorance. You know, I mean, you know, these little kids have, you know, so if anything happens, they're the first to go. You know, your kid, you don't want them to be excluded, but you're excluding them, you know. But you'd be amazed at how many families and parents exempt their children from vaccinations. So I agree. I think it's just ignorance and people feeling they can make that personal choice. They can do it because that's really their thought. a lot of the times the parents, when you
Right.
ask, I just don't want my child vaccinated. So I think they get to make that choice, and they make that choice. But we have a lot of children unvaccinated.
Right. Right. And that you would think that's the one thing we could all agree on, right? Is keep the kids safe, but doesn't seem to be the case. Yeah, Kara, if it's okay, I just had one more question for the panel. So life has obviously changed a whole bunch since COVID has come into our lives. Case in point, we're having this discussion online and streaming it as opposed to in person. But a lot of other aspects of our lives have changed as well, including the things we talk about in public forums, the way we hang out, what we consume. Of all of the changes that have been inconvenient, what change are you hoping stays or maybe even grows once we are out of the pandemic, if any? Has there been any lessons learned, conversations that have come about, changes to your day-to-day life that you want to see actually continue when we do come out of the pandemic?
None for me. I miss I
That's totally
miss
fair.
being able to have gatherings, be around people, hug people. Um, I have young adult children. Them being able to move on with their life and being able to, have the same freedoms that I had as a young person. To be able to date, my grandchildren to be able to go play, getting off of the internet and off of the computers. I don't want anything to stay the same. I want I want to go back to the old way of life, because I think those when things were really good and people could trust and love and be kind and caring, all of those characteristics we used to have, we just don't have the same anymore. So I don't want anything to stay the same. I want it to be back the way it used to be, where people could hug each other. That's what I miss, is being able to really hug people that I care about, enjoy the children I work with in the full capacity that you can, sit them on your lap and laugh and talk and rub, cheeks and all that stuff, talk to your parents and shake their hand or whatever. I don't want anything to stay the same. I want it back the way it used to be.
Ditto. Right
Oh,
there with you.
I will say
Yay,
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Warden.
Oh, pardon me, doctor. I just wanted to say that I want all those sweet things to be back. I want to be able to hug. I work at a rec center where I get 15 hugs a day at my rec center. I get 15 hugs a day at least, every day, Monday through Friday, for my teenagers. And that changed my life, not having that. What I do want to stay the same is that you wash your hands. That's what I want you to do. You got to scrub them hands. Please do that. I love y'all. Thank you.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, I've invested so much in cleaning supplies and soap ever since COVID. I am just clean as a whistle.
Yes, sir.
So there's one thing I wish I could have done, and that is stay home. But unfortunately, I have been in the streets with COVID patients for the past 18 months, and that is wearing on me as a person. But the one thing I wish that stays the same is the ability to use telemedicine the way that I envisioned it being used before COVID, as a true barrier removal to access of care. Now, understanding people need a phone or a computer to do so, but it's still one more point of access that people have that they never had before. So telemedicine should stay right where it is.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That has been it's been a wonder both in the field of health with telemed, but also just work. how suddenly a lot of industries were able to transition people to working from home, when before the pandemic it seemed like that would be impossible and it was a no-go, and there were 1,000 reasons why you couldn't do those things. And now that we're in the pandemic, now it's a part of day-to-day life. And I agree with you that that push for accessibility needs to stay.
I like that too, but I still like that human contact. So because I wasn't a computer person, and now my job, everything I do is on the computer. I wasn't a computer
Right.
fan. I wasn't a fan of technology, and I thought I would be retired before I really had to do it and use it. And so the pandemic have made me learn more about technology, and it is nice. So I agree with that part, but I still miss that human contact.
You know, this conversation has been so beautiful and powerful, informative, and just everything in between that you can imagine. I want to thank everyone as we're coming to a little bit beyond the end of our time together for being willing to join in with us. Dr. Baker, your presentation was, folks in the comments were saying it was the most informative thing they've seen for the entire pandemic. And that's the kind of information that we need to get out. I've got to say, if there's one thing I really hope stays the same, it's this ability to get information out, because this sort of platform was not something that we really thought about before. And to be able to share this information out to the community, to be able to hear each of your stories, Ms. Crystal, Ms. Sandra, Ms. Deb, and to engage in this way is so, I think, powerful for our community. So thank you all for sharing with us. I'll invite Miss Bernadine back on if she has any closing remarks. And as we're closing out, we also want to take an opportunity to encourage people to like and follow our new LBE program Facebook page at Lived Black Experience. This is a page that was created specifically for these dialogues. For the rest of this year, we're still going to be streaming on the Murdoch Community Center's page through the end of the year and resharing them to the new page. Then beginning in January 2022, we will begin live streaming from that LBE program page. So make sure that you like and follow at Lived Black Experience now, so that you can keep up with all that the LBE is offering now and into the new year. As we always say, we are so thankful to our community for joining us and being part of the conversation. We're so grateful for how many of you joined us this evening. There was a lot of great engagement happening, a lot of good questions, a lot of good dialogue in the chat. So I'm very grateful for each of you who joined us tonight. Miss Bernadine?
Wow. It really was an awesome discussion. And, we are a mighty people. And I'm thinking about Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who said, "Up ye mighty race and conquer what you will." And we have done so much, and we are so much. And despite the struggles and the challenges, we are still here. And I'm grateful for a project such as this, and individuals such as all of your beautiful faces that I'm seeing on the screen, you beautiful humans who exist to be able to come to speak about us and what we need to do and how we need to come together. Truly, I think Dr. Baker would agree that I think we're in this for the long haul. And in closing, that's my question. How do we foresee realistically an end to this and a return to normal. I think we are now in the new norm, but Dr. Baker, to close us out, what does your wisdom and expertise tell us?
If I had a crystal ball, I would say if people still have hesitancy with vaccination going into the new year, we're going to have another variant, which is going to be even more contagious than this one, and possibly even more virulent. I don't anticipate this being done for another few years without a serious vaccination effort. And even with a vaccination effort, because we're so far out of the box, it'll probably be another 18 months minimum. Those are my guesstimates.
Yeah. And not to end on a dismal note, the truth shall set us free every time. And that is what this project is all about. I think that's what all of us are doing, whatever our chosen professions are, to be authentic, to be real, to be honest in all that we do. And so, with that being said, we are obviously in this for the long haul. Our work, each of us in our respective careers, our work is not done. I would submit to you that we really are just beginning. We're in a new beginning. And so, as we begin to step into this new beginning, it is wonderful to have these spaces to come in and to talk and to share, to be enlightened, educated, and informed. And so, thank each and every one of you for the work that you do, for the love and care that you give, for the wisdom that you unselfishly came this evening to share. And as we bring this discussion, this dialogue to an end, we encourage everyone to make sure that they are remaining safe and healthy and happy, and to speak power to truth, truth to power, because it is an exchange, and how important it is that we all get vaccinated and that we all continue to practice social distancing and washing our hands. And so, with that being said, go live well, go in grace.